Guys, welcome back to the podcast at Luton Grappling Club. I'm here with Coach Simon. Simon, thank you for joining us.
Nice to be here.
Guys, if you don't recognise Simon, Simon's been teaching karate in Luton for how long now?
Yeah, it's about 25 years I've been teaching.
That's impressive. That's really impressive. I've been teaching jiu-jitsu for 8 years. And I, always boast about that, but now I think I'm going to start trying to get down.
Young man, that's what it is, yeah.
And we're talking about your club. So for the guys that don't know your club,
if
you want to introduce your club.
Yeah, so we are Sendo-Ryu Martial Arts Association. We are a traditional Japanese karate club. So we teach Japanese karate, so blocks, kicks, punches, strikes, kind of kumite, kata, the kind of things that your viewers will be very familiar with. But then we also layer in some more kind of modern elements, kind of more realistic self-defense, combat, kind of stand-up grappling to take down. We're nowhere near the level of grappling and groundwork of you guys, but we dabble in it, I would say. We're still beginners in that area. But we do a bit of weapons as well.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, so kind of weapons, kind of traditional Japanese weapons as well. But because we're a small club, we're able to take elements from different areas as well.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of cross-training going on through our instructorship as well. So they all bring those elements back to the club as well, which is really good.
And you guys have been established in Luton for how long?
Yeah, so we've been in Luton since... so Sendo-Ryu was founded in 1983. First club in Luton was in Inkerman Street, just down the corner.
Yeah.
And then the first senseis were there. Moved over to Bury Park. We're in Oakdale Church Hall, and then Bury Park Community Centre for quite a while. And now we're here in our new home. Very pleased to be here.
Yeah. Welcome here. We hope this is maybe, I wouldn't say your final home, but growing up, I done a little bit of kung fu when I grew up, and then it was kind of straight into boxing, and it was kind of so I kind of missed the whole karate element of things. But why is it so important to kind of I would say, why is it important for especially children to train traditional martial arts? Because for me, I've got 2 young boys. And it's very I would never want to put them into MMA straight away.
Yeah,
I just feel like MMA is just so violent, and it's, I wouldn't want to get that phone call from school where the head teacher calls me up and says, your kid has just hit someone in the face, punched someone in the face, or kicked someone in the head. That's what I wouldn't want.
Yeah,
so why is it for kids? Why is it so important?
It's a really good question, and I think that what I would say is that the foundation of traditional martial arts is etiquette and discipline, or at least it should be. And I think there's a range of traditional martial arts that unfortunately have moved away from some of that, because ultimately we're in a business environment and people are trying to make money, and the recognition is actually that it's quite difficult to actually discipline and give children that discipline. So actually, if you want to be a successful martial arts coach or school, and quite often you will allow those standards to drop very slightly in order to get more people through the door. We've been a small club from day one, and still are a relatively small club. And actually what that allows us to do is actually to really focus on that etiquette, that discipline. Yeah. And I think for me, I started when I was 10. I'm not going to pretend I was a terror or anything like that, because I wasn't. But what it gave me is it gave me confidence. I was a relatively shy young man, relatively slight at that stage. And karate kind of brought me out of my shell. Yeah. And so I think we can bring both sides, so those people who are quite open, quite boisterous, you can kind of give them that sense of discipline, that sense of etiquette, that sense of actually just following the rules and recognising actually how the benefits are. And right the way through to those who, like me, are actually quite introverted, quite shy, actually brings them out of their shell. And I think that's really important as well. So it's both sides, I think.
Yeah, I think, for us coming from Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, we're starting to lose the etiquettes.
Yeah.
And it's sad to see it. We're starting to see that, clubs are starting to lose their discipline. And like you said, again, it is that fact that, now we're trying to drive a business, we're trying to get as many numbers through the door. But for us, especially with the children, it's so important. It's so important that, we maintain the discipline and the etiquettes. Because look, the parents are trusting us with their kids.
Yeah.
And that's the main thing is that, they've given us a trust and said, look, look after our kids, teach them martial arts. But again, a lot of the parents have trained traditional martial arts themselves. So they're expecting some sort of discipline.
Yeah.
If they come in and the kids are just running all over the place, they'll be like, hang on a second, this is not what I'm sending my kids.
No, that's right.
Or if their behaviour is getting worse, that is worrying as well. So for us as well, we're trying to hold on to that as well. We're trying to hold on to those etiquettes and the discipline. And look, some kids don't like it.
Absolutely.
And you're 100% right in saying that the more disciplined, and the more etiquettes you follow, some kids and some parents are going to struggle with that.
It's a real challenge, but also as well because the culture these days, and I don't want to be down on modern culture and young people. Of course, I don't want to be that, but I think there is a recognition though that sometimes you get parents stepping in and pushing against the boundaries that schools set out. So if you've got traditional educational establishments, schools,
Yeah.
and parents, children are being disciplined at school to an extent, and parents pushing back against that discipline, saying, "Why did you say that to my child?" And having those types of conversation with the educational establishments, legitimate statutory educational establishments, it's really difficult for us then, as professional coaches, but still, people are coming to us for a service. It's not a statutory service. We're not government mandated. So it's actually really quite difficult to actually layer in that discipline, whereas children might not have that from
Yeah.
from 9 a.m. through to 3 p.m. in the school environment. And unfortunately, again, let's talk about everything really, is they might not have that at home as well. So those things are really difficult. But what I tend to see is that you absolutely do get a lot of parents coming through to say, "My child is unruly, can you do something about it?" And we up front say, "Probably not."
Yeah.
Probably not.
Yeah.
We can try, but the reality is this, and we'll be really open and honest, we're not here as kindergarten. We're here we can do what we can do, but ultimately, we can't unpick hours and hours and months and years worth of poor discipline. So, hopefully for us, it's about layering on top the foundations and the skills that the children already have. And we'll do what we can to try and put those into place. But if they're not there already,
It's tough.
yeah,
It's tough. We've got parents that they come and they say, "Look, coach, can you tell him to do his homework?" And I'm like, "Wow, that's tough."
yeah,
Because we're seeing the kids are great, and I love teaching kids, but we're seeing them for 1 hour a week.
exactly.
And how much influence are we as coaches going to have?
Yeah.
For that 1 hour.
Yeah.
And in that 1 hour, we need to be teaching them martial arts.
Mm.
We're trying to do a little bit of discipline and etiquettes and everything. It's all encompassed in one. But if they're going back home or if they're going to school and they're not receiving the same message,
yeah,
it's almost impossible.
It really is. It really is.
And I've kind of seen that myself, and I've realized that myself with my 8 years of teaching. That it's tough unless the message is the same at home.
Yeah.
Unless the message is the same at school.
Mm.
That's when you start to see the kids develop.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it doesn't matter how strict we are. You send us the child for 1 hour a week, it's going to make very, very little difference.
Absolutely.
If you're not reading from the same script at home.
Yeah, and you can be a model, you can be a role model, and I've seen your coaches, I've seen the way you teach. You've got good, strong role models standing up in front of the young people, giving them real aspiration moving forward. And you just think, well, okay, so it's for them to understand that, but it's also as well, it's the parents. And what I really like with just if you don't mind me saying so, but what I really like about your classes is that the parents come along and the parents are there looking.
Yeah.
That's always been a real good sign for me when parents drop off their children and then say, "Right, see you in an hour," and everyone's busy.
Yeah.
I understand that completely. But if they're coming back and say, "Oh, what did you learn today? What did you do? What did they?" And those are the conversations that they're having, you can see there's an interest. I'm sure those will be the same parents that will say, "What did you do at school today? How are you getting on?
They're engaged.
What homework have you got?"
Engaged with their children.
Exactly, and that's the key thing as well. And I would encourage, it's not just we're here to teach students, but also as well, it's that learning environment that families can create for those students.
Yeah.
And I think that's really key. And if we can get that bit across as well, we're very happy to have those conversations.
If the parents value the martial arts and they value jiu-jitsu and karate and all these other things, then the child will value that as well.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's difficult if the parents, for example, one thing that we're quite strict on is timekeeping.
Yeah.
We try to kind of push this on the parents and say, "Look, bring your children on time." This way, it all starts from walking in on time.
Yeah.
That's where it starts.
Absolutely. Yeah.
If you're 10 minutes late, 15 minutes late, it's just whatever it is. It just gives that impression that, look, this whatever you're coming for, it's not that important.
No.
I can come 15 minutes late, and guess what? It's fine. Or 20 minutes late.
Exactly.
It's fine. Compared to, for example, if I was going to go to an interview now, I would get there at least, for me, I'm a bit, with time, I'd get there at least half an hour early. To go there, sit down. Don't bring your kids half an hour early. Okay, 5 minutes is enough.
Yeah.
But for me, that's what I'm like.
Yeah.
Because I really value this interview.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's where it all stems from. And we push it on the parents. And we say, look, make sure your kids are on time. And obviously sometimes you get parents that always bring them late, but we just always keep saying it to them. That this is impressionable on your child.
It is.
And if you don't respect it, and if you don't have enough respect for it to bring them on time, the child sooner or later is going to say, guess what, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, it's not that important.
It's not. And, you could also as well roll it all the way forward as well. You look at, so everyone comes into traditional martial art, any martial art wanted to be a black belt. That's the desire for everybody comes in. It isn't it? But so ultimately, you look at those people who do manage to achieve that, and there's a common thread that runs through them. Dedication, motivation, drive. And that just doesn't come through martial arts. That comes through in every aspect of that person.
Yeah.
And you look at your black belts. I look at my black belts. Our black belts. They're all overachievers, not just in martial arts, but in their lives in general. And that's really key. And I often say, not necessarily to parents, because I think it's a difficult conversation for them to have, but ultimately you can see who is going to be a good student right there and then.
Yeah.
Lesson one. And that's a kind of a really difficult challenge, because you as an instructor, you as a coach, be thinking, no, I can train everyone. I can drag the best out of everyone, and you can, but it's that 1 hour a week.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what it comes down to. So there is a real challenge, but I think the other side of it we should talk about though is just the reward, the challenging. It's hard, it's tough, it's frustrating, but the other side of it is so rewarding.
100%.
To see those young people kind of move from, coming their first tentative steps into the dojo, into the training room, not knowing what they're doing, being like I was, shy, nervous, not really understanding what they're there for. Just parents are dropping you off, go and learn karate. All right then.
Yeah.
And then years later, think, oh no, this is really good. I understand it now. It's starting to make sense for me. And then finding your place, finding your space, finding a new set of friends. And then actually, over the years, it comes to be part of who you are and how you see the world. I'm a martial artist. It's kind of how I would define myself. And I think that's really, that is really, really quite powerful. And now it's not just about me. It's, I'm coach. And actually, it's not about me. It's about my students. And actually, I look at the progress that they make, and you just think, well, you can feel that such a sense of pride in how they're moving forward and how they're doing, not just in their martial arts but in life in general. And that that's worth it all.
100%. Look, we have guys that go to compete some of the biggest tournaments around Europe, around the UK. And I'll be honest with you, like when I know someone's competing, normally on a Saturday or a Sunday, I'm just waiting to hear good news. Honestly, I'm just waiting to hear good news. And when they post up on the group, and you see these pictures of them with gold medals, silver medals, whatever it is, and honestly, it makes you feel really proud.
Yeah,
it makes you feel proud as a coach, but also that like you said, it's that journey. You've seen them from day one. You've seen them come in, like we all did, even myself.
Absolutely,
We walked into that gym on day one, not knowing anything. And again, now we're here where we are as black belts. But again, it's just that hard work, and I always tell some students, I say, look, time will pass you by, and it will. And it's up to you whether you want to do this, for 10 years, and guess what? At the end of 10 years, you'll be a black belt. Or you don't do it, and guess what? 10 years will still pass you by.
It will do.
And that's the thing.
Yeah.
Time will always pass you by. And it's sacrifice you have to. I'm sure you've made huge sacrifice in your life for your martial arts. But I think it does teach you sacrifice as well.
It does. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's one of the key things I tell the parents is that, look, it will teach your children sacrifice. They will understand what's important in life, and they will be able to sacrifice for it, whether that's education or a career, a job, whatever it is. They already know how to sacrifice, and it's easy for them.
Yeah, it's perspective, it's balance, isn't it? It's that as a when I started, I was 10. I didn't know I wasn't responsible for my own time, but over time you learn. You've got GCSEs, A levels, university, jobs, family commitments. Everything comes through, and now it's a balance, isn't it? You've got so much demand on your time. There are many things that both you and I could be doing today, right now.
Yeah,
I'm sure you've got things to do when you get home. I know I've got things to do when I get home.
Yeah,
but and it's about actually prioritizing those and just thinking through, well, actually, what is important. But it's not just important to me, it's what is important to the martial arts, what is important to actually that journey on helping others on their journey. And I think for me, that's the really important thing. It's not just about, yes, I do it because I enjoy it, but it's also about you do it for, altruistic reasons as well. That passion that you can see germinating in others as they come through. And that is, you know, I keep on coming back to it because it's such a powerful thing.
And then when your students become better than you,
that's the dream. That's the dream, though.
Honestly, it is.
Yeah, but it is, because that's what you want. I mean, otherwise, you know, martial arts collectively would never move forward.
Yeah.
You know, we always, you know, I mean, I wish I could get to the level of my instructors, and I'm sure my instructors before them wish they could get to the level of their instructors.
Yeah.
That's the way it is. But the reality is that, you know, you keep on training, you keep on training. You know, there's, you know, that principle of, you know, continuous improvement, just every day, just kind of moving forward,
Just a
incremental
little
gains.
1%.
Exactly,
Just a little 1%
exactly.
at a time,
Yeah.
You know, we talk about with some of the students, mainly the adult students, where they'll feel like they've hit a wall.
Yeah.
They'll be like, look, coach, nothing's happening. You know, it's been 6 months. I feel like I'm at the same place. And you say to them, look, everyone's improving. You know, as a gym as a whole, we're all increasing a little bit every single. So you're not going to see your progression.
You're right.
You know, if everyone stopped training and you trained for 6 months and then we all came back, yeah, you'd see it. And I think that's the hard thing. That's really, especially for jiu-jitsu, I'm sure it's the same for you guys as well. It's so tough. You know, it's such a slow moving machine.
Yeah.
You know, and everyone, like I said, everyone is moving with you. You know, so it's hard to see your progress sometimes.
It is, but then, you know, so again, it's what are you focused on? Are you focused on the end of your journey, or are you focused on the journey?
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the key thing, because, you know, I mean, I'm sure, you know, when I was younger, black belt, so focused, so driven to getting that black belt. And then you get the black belt and think, okay, do I feel any different now? And I do feel different. But then I've been training as a black belt now, you know, pushing 25 years. And, you know, am I still proud to put on that black belt? Yes, I'm still proud to put on that black belt. But ultimately, wearing a black belt doesn't actually mean as much to me now as it does when I did before. The journey is more important.
And it's that continuation of that journey, right? That continually trying to improve and get better. And then obviously as we get older, there's challenges, there's speed issues. You know, everything's a lot more slower than it used to be. But yeah, I was the same. I was fixated on getting a black belt.
Yeah, of course.
You know, like we all were. You know, and that was the goal. But like I said, once you get to that goal, it's like, okay, now what? And then I think it's almost like when you get to black belt, then you really understand the whole martial art, and then really understand actually it's more than just that belt. You know, this is I wanted to continue this for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
You know, and ultimately because we enjoy it so much.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the truth. I enjoy it every single day. I'm in the gym. I'm enjoying it, whether I lose or win or whatever it is. You know, it takes me away from, you know, the stresses of work, the stresses of family. You know, it takes away from all of that. And I encourage the children as well, especially ones that are coming up to their exams and GCSEs season. I say to the parents, sometimes I say, look, just let them come once a week.
Yeah.
Just give them that break. But for that 1 hour, they don't have to think about English or maths or science or whatever it is. And when I was kind of like going through university, I almost felt like that helped me. Because I would study in the morning. I always like to wake up in the morning. I would study in the morning. And then I'd have a break where I'd go to the gym. This is before I was doing jiu-jitsu. And then when I'd come back fresh.
Yeah.
Almost like I'd never studied in the morning. You know, and then I was able to do another maybe like 3-4 hours. You know, and that's key.
It is key.
And it works for us as adults. And it definitely works for children.
Well, that discipline is really key. And I think, you know, there's a lot of sides to this, isn't there? There's the kind of, you know, you're talking a little bit about the kind of body and mind connection there. And that's absolutely key. And ultimately, you can't just focus on one element of it. And, you know, there will always be peaks and troughs throughout your life. You're focused on exams, you've got to get through those things. You're focused on your GCSEs, your A levels, in exactly the same way you're focused on getting the black belt. It's the only thing in front of you. You've got tunnel vision for that one goal. And, you know, sometimes it can be to the detriment of other things. But actually, you know, as you get older, you start to realise that it's really important to keep everything just in perspective. And actually how that thing that was hugely important to you at that one particular moment in time actually does kind of almost fade away.
Yeah.
And actually it's everything. And it's that journey of actually understanding that totality of that balance. And I think for me as well also is that whole journey to black belt and then operating as a black belt, I think is a really important one. I actually don't think many people talk about this, but for me, I always kind of think of being kind of learning, getting back to that black belt is kind of almost like learning a new language. So as you go through the belts, you're learning vocabulary, you're learning new techniques, you're learning new skills. And then as you kind of progress a bit further, you start to learn sentences and structures and how to put together words, but it's all rote learning, you know. Where is the library? The library is that way, turn right at that thing. Route learning, isn't it? So you're not able to necessarily express yourself. You know that if someone says this to you, you do that. You know that if someone puts you in that technique, you do this technique to get out of it. It's you don't understand what it is you're doing, you just know what to do with that technique. And then you get to black belt and you actually think, oh, I know everything now, and then that's when you know the language. And that's when, because you know the language and you know how to express yourself, you're actually free to just be artistic and actually start to really express yourself through that language, through that martial arts that you've learned. And I think for me, that's when it gets really interesting, because it's at that point that you actually start to find out who you are as a martial artist. Because up until that black belt, you're modeling yourself on your instructors. I need to learn all these things to get through the syllabus. I need to get through this to learn on my belt test. And that's really important. But you've got the building blocks at that point. And now when you've got them, it's like, well, okay, what are you going to do with them?
Yeah.
Show me something. And I think a lot of people, they kind of get so focused on that, I've got to get to black belt, they kind of forget what do you do once you've got it.
Yeah.
And they're kind of still in that realm of, teach me something, sensei. Teach me something, coach. Show me a technique. It's like, well, no, come on, you're a black belt, so you show me something. You show me something. And I think actually that's something that I think that's the difference between a good black belt and a bad black belt. Someone who actually has understanding that they can actually figure these things out for themselves, and they've got something to show everyone else as well. So yes, fine, they may not be a coach of X amount of years of experience, but you and I will very happily learn from anyone.
Yeah,
whatever belt they are.
Absolutely.
And I think some of those times, I think sometimes people kind of get to that level and they kind of forget that bit as well.
Yeah. It's hard. It's like you said. It's hard to think past that black belt.
It really is.
I didn't like it. I had no idea. Once you get it, you're like, okay, now what? You're still coming to the same gym the next day. You're still training with the same training partners. The only difference now is you're wearing, instead of a brown belt, you're wearing a black belt.
Yeah.
And everyone wants to get you. But that's it. That's
that's right. That's right, though, isn't it? Yeah, you're a target now. Yeah,
you're a target. Yeah. But in terms of, for example, like with jiu-jitsu, we only learn grappling. That's primarily what we're doing is grappling. But you guys got weapons, which is really interesting. But in terms of like, how would it kind of come into part where you say we learn weapons? For what reason are you guys still learning weapons? Because obviously we can't walk around with spears and daggers, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But what's the essence of still learning martial arts with weapons?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So that I think is really key. So traditional martial arts are interesting. From the perspective of, if you really think about it, a lot of people will say that traditional martial arts aren't functional. But they are and they aren't. So the first, if you learn a punch in karate, you're taught how to make a fist, and then to very carefully lock your thumb over your fingers and you hit with these points of your knuckles, and that's a solid part of your. And then you're taught to strike with that seiken, the foreknuckle, to a vulnerable point of someone's body, and you're taught that as soon as you walk through the class. Now that is incredibly violent. That is incredibly violent, but that is a martial art, because martial art's not about self-defense. Martial art is warfare. And so in order to honour the tradition of martial arts, it's important to actually maintain those traditions of the past and understand where those weapons come from. So, traditional karate is Okinawan, so Japanese island, and the traditional Japanese weapons, Okinawan weapons, are all modified farming implements. So the 6-foot bow was a stick that people used to carry over their shoulders with buckets on it. The 4-foot staff, the jo, it's essentially a walking stick. And then you've got nunchaku, who everyone knows, but they're rice flails that they used to dehusk rice. So those are traditional wooden farming implements that were modified for use as weapons by for the Okinawan peasants to fight off aggressors. Now, you need to know that in order to use those weapons effectively. And actually, as you say, you can't carry the weapons. So what benefit is it to yourself and your training? Well, history, I think. History, tradition. And also, it's technical mastery as well. And it's understanding that this inanimate object, this 4-foot piece of wood, okay, fine, I can use it to prop open a door, but I can also do this with it. I think actually just having that understanding of using that implement, inanimate object, in order to extend your ability to defend yourself, it's actually quite an interesting approach. And then you can actually say, well, then in the environment that we're in, unfortunately, would you ever need to fight to defend yourself in a street type environment? And in that environment, if you needed to, could you pick up a modified weapon and actually use that? Then that's when it becomes interesting there, because you've got traditional skills which you're then interpreting to a modern environment. And you could skip over those, the traditional skills altogether, and just focus on modified weapons. And a lot of classes will do that. Realistic self-defense, realistic combat styles will do that. Combatives, essentially. I'm not saying one approach is better and one approach is worse. They're just different.
Yeah.
But I think for me, I quite like. I'm a bit of a martial arts geek a little bit. Quite happily, hold it. And I think for me personally, that's quite interesting, because it roots what you're doing in that tradition of the past. And if we can in some way kind of keep it going, I think we are a little bit of custodians, really, because I'm certainly not invented any of this stuff.
Yeah.
I'm just doing what's been handed down for hundreds of years. So that's all it is for me.
Yeah, 100%. We've got some techniques in jiu-jitsu, so you think to yourself, when am I ever going to use this?
Yeah, exactly.
But again, you still learn it.
Yeah, you learn
still
it.
pass it on. I did a little bit of a screamer maybe
okay.
about 10 years ago.
Okay.
And I'll be honest, I loved it. I think it's so interesting, fighting with a stick. It almost takes you away from jiu-jitsu, which was nice as well. So one, you're trying to get away from life with jiu-jitsu, then you're trying to get away from jiu-jitsu with something else.
Yeah.
But look, I loved it. I thought it was really fun. And again, it was really fun to learn.
Yeah, absolutely.
I enjoyed it. It was fun to learn. Like I said, it was something different what I was doing in terms of jiu-jitsu wise. So yeah, I thought it was cool. Yeah. Do you use any kind of spears or anything?
No, so those types of things are more kind of traditional Chinese, so wushu, Wing Chun kind of things. So yeah, we tend to use that. Karate is very, it's a Japanese martial art. It's very straight, very angular. Kind of the Chinese martial arts, more Tai Chi, Wushu, Wing Chun. They're quite circular, which is kind of more flexible weapons like bamboo type rattan weapons. So spears, the flexible kind of things there. But the traditional martial arts weapons, they are solid, they are rigid.
Yeah. You got to feel them.
Yeah.
Even for us, like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, it kind of goes back. The lineage goes back to Japanese Jiu-Jitsu and Judo. You know, it's kind of, because obviously you look at Japan, such a small island.
Yes.
Yeah, it gave us most of the martial arts, right? So that's always interested me.
Yeah, absolutely.
How, and again, they're good at wrestling. They're good at most things.
Yeah.
Even jiu-jitsu now.
Yeah.
Even now they're coming into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and you're starting to see some Japanese guys, at world-class level.
Yeah.
Because they're doing really well. In terms of, obviously for us, we have the whole kind of like drilling in jiu-jitsu. So for example, we'll drill a technique, we'll show a technique, we'll drill the technique, and then we'll do open sparring.
Yeah. And
a lot of our training, I would say maybe at least 60% of our training is sparring. So we spar heavy all the time. How does it look for you guys?
Yeah, see, that's a real benefit, I think, that you guys have that we don't have in traditional martial arts. And again, I think that's something that we should be really open to as traditional martial artists, and we should learn from that kind of combat sport tested, practice, which works really well, super efficient. We don't do that. So technically, what we will do a lot of time is that for the junior belts, the kind of coloured belts we call them before you get to black belts, they'll spend a lot of time doing techniques in line work, so going up and down the line, practicing kicks, punches, blocks, strikes. And then for the more senior students, they get a bit older, they'll start to use punch bags, shields, things like that. So they're actually using and testing the ability to deliver the technique against a static kind of opponent, as it were. And then at the same time, we'll do sparring. The interesting thing, though, I think about striking and striking arts is that you can't. So you can hit punch bag as hard as you can. You can kick a punch bag as hard as you can, but you can't do that to the person. Yeah. And so any sparring that happens within traditional martial arts is watered down by definition. And so it is that you can look at the sport aspect of karate. It's not something that we teach very much these days, if I'm honest. And part of that is because where we are as instructors. I'm not saying we did that, when we were younger, and a few of the instructors, did very well in that kind of environment. But time has moved on, and actually, if what you're trying to do is you're trying to develop on develop the power of your kick, let's say, for example's sake, then actually the way to test that is not against a resisting opponent, because the guy's got to work tomorrow and you're going to go and break his ribs. I mean, that's not going to help anybody. So it's a slightly different environment, but I think one of the things that, like I said, we can really learn from is testing ourselves in a much more controlled environment, but using a potential higher level of aggression on the mat. And I think jiu-jitsu does that incredibly well. And I think actually that's something that I'm really conscious of here, actually, since we've been here, kind of looking at the way you guys operate and seeing if we can learn from some of that, because I really think that we can, and we should do a bit more of that.
I think one thing that we don't tend to do, like you look at Thai boxing, for example, you look at all the greatest Thai fighters, and you watch them train with each other. It's all light.
Yeah.
Like you see when they're sparring, everything is so low. It's almost touch sparring.
Yeah.
But when they fight, oh wow, it's just a different thing. All of them, all the world champions. I think one thing in jiu-jitsu maybe we do too much is we spar too hard sometimes. And sometimes there isn't that space for growth. Because you're just going 100% all the time. Tunnel vision all the time, tunnel vision. And sometimes you're missing some of the bits on the side that might be great. And that's something that I try to do a little bit now. With the coloured belts. Not so much with the black belts, because if you try to do anything differently, they're gonna eat you up. So I try not to do the black, but definitely with the coloured belts, I try to let it move a little bit more freely. So kind of give a little bit more, and make it a little bit more of an active role. And I think, like I said, it's just getting to black belt. You start understanding these things a bit better.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's exactly right. I mean, I think that opportunity for growth, because, like you say, everyone's so focused on that end game, you kind of forget the journey. And the journey is one of growth. It's one of learning, and it's actually also realizing that different people are going to be good at different elements of what it is that they're being taught. And actually, sometimes it's worth exploring those. And as a coach, as an instructor, sometimes you don't, because you just think, I've got to teach them this technique, and I've got to teach them that technique, and I've got to teach them that technique. But actually, sometimes, you're working with a group, you're working with students, and they'll you can show they've got a particular aptitude for something. But sometimes, students will do something. Oh, that's interesting. Didn't think about doing it that way. Or someone will ask you a question, and you just think, it's a good question. And then you think about it, you think, oh, actually, yeah, you're right. You're right, because generally speaking, I mean, there's no right or wrong answer for these things. So that's generally my default position. Oh yeah, you're right. You can use it for this. It's just that the example we're giving isn't necessarily that. But yes, you definitely can. And actually, thinking about that, why don't we try it that way? And actually, some of those things are really interesting.
Even in jiu-jitsu now, we're starting to see not a huge amount of movement, but we are starting to see people trying to move away from what we say like traditional drilling. We've always had this saying that drillers are killers. So people have always been, drilling, like you said, learn the move,
absolutely,
spar the move. But we're starting to see an approach now in jiu-jitsu. And again, I don't know whether it's people trying to monetize it or not. There is that element of it as well that people do try to monetize.
Oh, interesting, yeah.
Because sooner or later they'll release a DVD. Everyone buys the DVD, But that's what they're trying to do at the minute now, and say, actually, all this drilling it's a waste of time. Just all you need is concepts. If we give you concepts, then you just spar with the concepts.
Interesting.
It's very interesting, but then you look at all the world champions and look, they all drill. All the world champions do everything that we've done.
But that is interesting, though, isn't it? Because I mean, if you look at the karate world champions, I mean, it's been said very commonly that you can win a world championship using 4 techniques, and that's the thing. And so you think, well, okay, but if you are driven by winning and you want those titles, then you could focus and spend all your time drilling a dozen techniques and refining those minutely and spending all your time just driving out those extra 1% and overcoming all those diminishing gains, just really pushing super hard on those techniques that you can put them on anybody. And that will win you championships. And if that's what you're after, absolutely, that's what you should do. Alternatively, you could say, well, this is the breadth of what I have on offer to me. And actually, I want to not necessarily be a jack of all trades and a master of none, but I want to have an exposure to all of this breadth there, and I want to understand, the variety of things that are open to me. And I think, most of us operate somewhere between those things. And as I say, over time, sometimes you're very, very focused, tunnel vision on delivering. I've got to get this done. I want this. This is the outcome I'm seeking. This is the best way to achieve it. And sometimes you think, oh, a bit free and easy at the moment. Or, and actually what I'm interested in doing is just trying stuff out.
Yeah. I've got a competition coming up in 4 weeks. Well, less than 4 weeks now. So again, now it's just super focused.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's no more kind of like playing around.
You've got no time for it.
New techniques. I got home in on those 4 techniques, like you said. And it's strange because you'll see in competition, you'll see the same guys hitting the same submissions all the time. They'll be known for this. Yeah, they'll be known for this. One of the greatest, obviously, probably the greatest jiu-jitsu competitor. He really just done things very basic, but he was so good at the basics.
Yeah.
He didn't have to do any of the really funny stuff that we all love. What's your take on karate combat? Have you watched some of it?
I have. Yeah. I have. I mean, for me, so I try and be positive, and I am positive about anything that people are doing martial arts. I'm happy with. I'm good with it. I'm supportive of it. Is everything my cup of tea? No, it isn't. I quite like karate combat. There is a bit of I struggle with the kind of UFC, WWE kind of sports entertainment, combat sports entertainment kind of thing, because you think, well, what is it about here? Is it about selling tickets and sponsorship and all that kind of thing, telling a story, or is it actually about the ability of competitors on the mat? I think karate combat has kind of got that balance about right, I would say, because actually these are people, legitimate fighters, who have good backgrounds in martial arts, and it's kind of a bit showy environment. You've got to sell tickets ultimately, and I think that's that's about right. I think, but the difficulty though is that as you start to build these brands, they are entertainment brands.
That's the thing.
Ultimately, so if you are UFC is successful because it went from outside, when it first started, and and some of the people you're talking about UFC competing, in the very early days, they were watched by martial artists and people who were interested in martial arts.
Appreciate it.
Now, they're not. You have to expand that market if that's what you want to do. And I think ultimately boxing's done that over the years. You've got a year-long build-up to a fight, and then the fight's over in 15 minutes. But it's the year-long build-up that sells the tickets and gets people excited and involved. And like I said, UFC is doing that really well. Are those the best fighters on the planet? I mean, I'm sure we've both got views on that. But ultimately, that's the way that particular franchise will market themselves. But karate combat, I think, it feels more legitimate. So, like I said, I'm really super supportive of everything that people are doing.
I think they're doing a great job. It's fun to watch. Obviously, like you said about in terms of traditionally, it was martial artists watching the UFC and they're watching all these other organizations. I don't think we should ever sometimes it's hard to watch when somebody gets knocked out or when something happens and it's celebrated. That's what it's almost like, oh, is this what we're watching it for?
Yeah.
Are we watching somebody, we're waiting to see somebody get knocked out? And then you think to yourself, how much am I actually appreciating? All the hard work this individual's put in. Because like you said, within a second, it happens.
It does.
If someone gets head kicked, it's lights out. And you hear the arena go crazy and you hear the roar and the guy just doesn't know where he is. And it's there on the internet for the rest of your life. It's tough. It's tough.
It really is. Tough. It really is.
Compared to for example, traditionally, if you had a room full of martial artists, somebody got knocked out, it would be in absolute silence. Does that make sense?
It does.
Because we'll have that respect, knowing that look, that can happen. That could be me, that could be you, that could be anyone.
Absolutely.
But that's the thing. But like you said, it's an entertainment.
It's entertainment, and I think, like I said, it's really important. I mean, I'm all for exposing martial arts to the widest possible audience. I think that's important. The downside of it is though, but the potential it gives the wrong idea about martial arts to a very small element of the community. I think we've all struggled with that
Yeah.
You know,
100%.
you know.
Like we used to get parents calling us up the day after Khabib fought, and they'll be like, "Look, my son, he's definitely gonna be the next Khabib." You think, man, I can tell you now, he's not gonna be. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
Mm.
And that's the truth, right? That's the reality.
It is.
The greatest martial artists that we've seen have grew up in hardship, and they're dedicated, they put in the hard work. And for us, look, now we're all very comfortable.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's hard. I'm not sure who it was, but one of the famous boxers said, "Look, it's hard to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, in silk sheets."
Yeah.
Running.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And that's, I think, where we are now.
Yeah. You know, that's the thing, isn't it? You've got to be uncomfortable. That's what drives you.
Got the hunger.
Yeah. And ultimately as well, I think what's interesting as well is that I think in traditional martial arts, and obviously I include jiu-jitsu in that as well, the best fighters are probably not well known because they're operating in an environment whereby the only people who know about them are martial artists.
Yeah.
So you look at the best karatekas on the planet. They are people who are winning tournaments that people have never heard of.
Yeah.
They're not publicised. There's no one selling tickets to them. No one's going along to them. They're not on TV. They're not on pay-per-view.
And look, not everyone can perform under the lights.
Yeah, exactly.
But when it matters, they can.
Yeah.
Like if you're attacked in the street,
yeah,
that's really the time for you
to
show what you've learned, right? But Simon, it's great having you here. Thank you very much. Thank you to have you.
Really appreciate it.
So like I said, look now, Luton Grappling Club, we've got grappling, but also we've got karate as well.
Yeah.
So in terms for parents, just get your kids into martial arts. It's so great, whether it's jiu-jitsu, whether it's boxing, whether it's karate. Keep them busy, get them involved. And look, I always say they'll thank you when they're older. I thank my parents for putting me into martial arts when I was younger, and hopefully I'm seeing the benefits of it now. And I thank my father and I thank my mother. And it'll be the same for your children. They'll thank you. It's hard work. They'll always go through that period where they don't want to train. As parents, look, we know it's good for them, and we kind of keep bringing them, right?
Yeah.
And before you know it, they'll be black belts. Thank you very much, guys. Take care. Thank you, Simon.
Thank you. Thank you very much, man. Thank you.